William Walker Atkinson's The Mystery of Sex, or Sex Polarity. Chapter 9 was Higher Phases of Sex. This is Chapter 10, the final chapter, Regeneration. Nature devotes a great amount of energy to the task of reproducing living forms. Many of the lower forms of life seem to live merely for the purpose of reproducing life, of passing along the flame of life from torch to torch. Nature's reproductive energies are highly concentrated and are wonderfully potent. The amount of creative energy concentrated and compressed into the mustard seed is equal to the diffused over a whole large plant. In fact, the entire creative energy which is to serve the plant for its lifetime must be stored up within the seed itself. For the vital force cannot come from outside, although the outer nourishment is needed to build up the physical shape, form, and substance. The germ of the animal contains within itself enough stored up energy to carry the animal through its normal period of life. In the processes of reproduction and procreation, nature avails herself of her inner powers, and every minute, she works miracles of concentration and conservation of energy. The ancient occultists recognized the wonderful power stored in the reproductive organism, which is given out not only in the act of actual reproduction and procreation, but which may be also dissipated in the unnatural excesses and practices to which the race is addicted. They soon discovered that this wonderful concentrated power could be and is used not only for the purpose of generation, but also for the purpose of regeneration of the life activities within one's own body, the exhaustion of which occurs if the vital forces be not given out in procreation or waste. In other words, that the wonderful concentrated forces of the sexual functions, if not otherwise used or dissipated, might be used by the individual himself or herself in re-energizing, recharging, or regenerating the vital powers within his or her own organism. This was one of the reasons that continence was enjoined as a duty upon the members of the ancient esoteric and occult brotherhoods and sisterhoods. A.B. Stockham, M.D., says, physicists have demonstrated with uncontrovertible facts that it is eminently healthy to conserve the vital principle. The seminal secretion has a wonderfully imminent value, and if retained is absorbed into the system and adds enormously to man's magnetic, mental, and spiritual force. In ordinary married life, this force is constantly being wasted. Other things being equal, the man who wisely conserves is in concentrated mental and physical power and effectiveness, like a Daniel amid his companions. He builds and constructs. He is the organizer and executive head of industries. He is the orator and the inventor. He is the leader of great movements because his power is drawn from an inexhaustible storage battery. Although woman has not the semen to conserve, yet equally with man she has the thrilling potency of passion that, when well directed, heals sensitive nerves, vitalizes the blood, and restores tissue. Newton says, it is important to know that there are other uses for the procreative element than the generation of physical offspring, far better uses than its waste in momentary pleasure. It may indeed be better wasted than employed in imposing unwelcome burdens upon toiling and outraged women. But there should be no waste. This element, when retained in the system, may be coined into new thoughts, perhaps new inventions, grand conceptions of the true, the beautiful, the useful, or into fresh emotions of joy and impulses of kindness and blessing to all around. That is, in fact, but another department of procreation. It is the procreation of thoughts, ideas, feelings of goodwill, intuitions of truth. That is, it is procreation on the mental and spiritual planes instead of physical. It is just as really a part of the generative function as is the begetting of physical offspring. It is by far the greater part, for physical procreation can ordinarily be participated in but seldom, while mental and spiritual procreation may and should go on through all of our earthly lives, yea, through all our immortal existence. J.H. Kellogg, M.D., says it has been claimed by many, even by physicians, and though with but a slight show of reason, that absolute continence after full development of the organs of reproduction could not be maintained without great detriment to health. It is needless to enumerate all the different arguments employed to support this position, since they are, with a few exceptions, too frivolous to deserve attention. The popular notions upon this subject are wholly erroneous. Their general acceptance has been due, without doubt, to the strong natural bias in their favor. It is an easy matter to believe what agrees well with one's predilections. A bare surmise on the side of the prejudice is more telling than the most powerful logic on the other side. Professor Mayer says, "It is determined, in our opinion, that the commerce of the sexes has no necessities that cannot be restrained without peril. The contrary belief appears to us to be erroneous, without foundation, and easily refuted. Health does not absolutely require that there should ever be an emission of semen, from puberty to death, though the individual live 100 years. Atkinson says, there exists no greater error, nor one more opposed to physiological truth, than that which holds that continence produces impotence. In the first place, I may state that I have, after many years' experience, never seen a single instance of atrophy of the generative organs from this cause. I have, it is true, met the complaint, but in what class of cases does it occur? It arises in all instances from the exactly opposite cause: abuse. The organs become worn out, and hence arises atrophy. Physiologically considered, it is not a fact that the power of secretion is annihilated in well-formed adults leading a healthy life, and yet remaining continent. No continent man need be deterred by this apocryphal fear of atrophy from leading a chaste life. It is a device of the unchaste, or the unchaste, a lame excuse for their own incontinence, unfounded on any physiological law. Dr. Kellogg makes the following important statement, which corroborates the theories of the ancient occult teachers. Recent investigations have shown that the sexual glands are useful not only as a means of race perpetuation, but for the physical well-being of the individual through the vital stimulus exercised by them, through the influence of their peculiar secretion upon the processes of development and nutrition. In view of this fact, it is evident that, so far as the individual is concerned, physical benefit is to be looked for not in the loss of the secretion of the sexual glands, but in its retention and appropriation. In other words, reproduction is accomplished at the sacrifice of individual interests, a law which prevails throughout the whole organic world, being, in some instances, so pronounced that the development of progeny is accomplished only through the death of one or both parents. These discoveries afford thoroughly satisfactory and scientific explanation of two facts which heretofore have rested solely upon a basis of observation and experience. Number one, that continence is favorable to physical vigor, and number two, that sexual intemperance is productive of exhaustion and debility to a most extraordinary degree. Dr. Nicholas says, it is a medical and a physiological fact that the best blood in the body goes to form the elements of reproduction in both sexes. In a pure and orderly life, this matter is reabsorbed. It goes back into the circulation, ready to form the finest brain, nerve, and muscular tissue. This life of man, carried back and diffused through his system, makes him manly, strong, brave, and heroic. The suspension of the use of the generative organs is attended with a notable increase of bodily and mental vigor and spiritual life. And as another writer has said, nature finds another use for the unexpended sexual energy in employing it for the building up of a keener brain and more vital and enduring nerves and muscles. Outside of the list of the occult brotherhoods, all of whom were strictly continent, history gives us a long list of eminent men who followed the practice of continence, which indicates the correctness of the old occult teachings of regeneration. Newton, Kant, Pascal, Michelangelo, Plato, and many other eminent men were strictly continent. All the great occultists and mystics of ancient times observed strict continence. The Greek athletes training for the great Olympic Games were compelled to observe this strict continence. They experienced being that by this course they were able to conserve their vigor and strength much better. The prize fighters of today are compelled by their trainers to observe a strict continence during the period of training. Many of the former champions who went to pieces suddenly owe their downfall to a violation of this rule. Dr. Henderson, after years of experience in tropical countries, has said, I have seen many suffer severely, destroying their strength, health, happiness, and life by following the promptings of their unbridled passions. Need I say that I have never seen a man suffer from keeping himself pure? Dr. Kellogg well states the philosophy of continence as follows. The sexual function is double in its purpose. First, the sexual organs are always active, even when not excited, to such a degree as to obtrude their activity upon the consciousness. As they supply the body with a needed vital stimulus and regulator. Secondly, they furnish the only means by which the physical life of the individual and the perpetuation of the race may be accomplished. In neither of these important functions is the personal gratification of the individual the primary consideration. The exercise of the sexual function with a purely selfish purpose would seem to be a debasement of the sacred function in which man approaches most nearly to the creative power of which he is the image. But there is quite a difference, however, between the intelligent practice of continence on the one hand and the practice of an unnatural asceticism on the other. In intelligent continence, the sexual power, function, and organism is respected as one of the highest pieces of nature's handiwork, the symbol of the great creative force of the universe, to be used either for the purpose of procreation and reproduction, or else for the equally high purpose of regeneration or self-strengthening and development. On the other hand, the unnatural view of certain schools of asceticism regards the sexual power, function, and organism as something impure and vile. The continent occultist or mystic does not revile his sexual power, nor does he despise it. On the contrary, he rejoices in its possession, but instead of wasting and dissipating it in excesses or unnatural indulgences, he transmutes it in regeneration and builds up his physical, mental, and spiritual nature. Those who despise the sexual nature and who fear and loathe it bring upon themselves the inevitable reaction which always accompanies the unnatural practice of opposing any of nature's plans and processes as evil. They bring upon themselves the negative condition by which their creative forces are neutralized and inhibited, and they suffer in health, mind, and spirit. There is nothing impure about sex. The impurity lies in the abuse and unnatural use of the sexual functions. In the abuse and unnatural use of the sexual functions. Continence is a positive process. Asceticism is a negative process. There is a difference as wide as the poles between the two. Do not make the mistake of trying to kill out the sexual nature. Instead, strive to strengthen and develop it, but transmute its energies scientifically, intelligently, and naturally, in accordance with the world-old occult and mystic teachings of regeneration. This is the ancient wisdom regarding regeneration stated in a few pages. Consider it carefully, and you will be richly rewarded. The ascetic places himself in opposition to the currents of nature's creative forces. The continent individual places himself in full accord with the great life forces of nature. Instead of neutralizing his force, he conserves and transmutes it. Grasp the inner meaning of the paradox of sex, and you will have in your hand the control of many of the finer forces of the cosmos. We can but hint at the whole truth here. The time is not come for the full teaching, neither is this the place. But he who practices the teachings contained herein will place himself well upon the road to attainment, and the further truth will come to him as he progresses. Such is the law of the path of attainment.